It's time to engage, educate, and empower with Tracey Maxfield.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back and happy Thursday. This is Engage, Educate, and Empower, the podcast which aims to highlight the social issues, life challenges, and day-to-day problems that children, teenagers, and young adults around the world deal with. Today is a very special guest with a very unique and inspiring story. Interestingly, when I first connected with her and invited her to be a guest on the podcast, she immediately said that she had nothing really that she could share because she was not an expert in areas of mental illness, mental health, or bullying. However, I disagreed. And I finally convinced her to be on the show today. And I think after you've listened to this podcast, you will agree with me that Sylvia is an expert. Sylvia is an expert because she has chosen to add 3 adopted children to her family. And these adopted children all have very special needs. And so I think that she can truly speak to mental health, bullying, cultural clash of identities, even stigma. Sylvia Baize is a wife of 24 years to a wonderful man named Patrick, and she's the mother of 6 beautiful children, ages 5 to 21. Presently, she homeschools her 3 youngest. She was born in Brazil and had a beautiful childhood growing up in a gorgeous country. From ages 15 to 18, she fostered 3 sets of children in her parents' home and taught school for 3 years in the church schools of the conservative group she belonged to. She lived in Brazil until 19 years old, and then she moved to Kentucky in the United States, where she taught school. 1 month shy of her 20th birthday, she married Patrick and ended up living in South Dakota for the first 7 years of their married life and had their first 3 children were actually born there. They then moved to California for 7 years, and her sister's former foster son came to California when he was 18 years old and then lived with Sylvia and Patrick for 2 years. It was at that time Sylvia experienced a very severe mental breakdown triggered by family stress and disagreements with the religious leaders of the church they belonged to at that time. It was then she decided that she wanted to fulfill a dream she had had since she was a child, and that was to adopt. And so began a very long, tumultuous 3 years before they met a special little 7-month-old boy with spina bifida and hydrocephalus at an adoption picnic at the zoo. They fell in love and he became their son. Sylvia and Patrick then moved to Arizona and bought a small cafe. But after 4 years of hectic restaurant life, they sold it and life slowed down enough again for them to pursue adoption. They adopted 2 beautiful, sweet girls from the Arizona foster care system. Their youngest daughter had a cleft lip and palate and has required numerous surgeries to correct that. Thinking that the family was then complete, Sylvia purged everything related to babies, and even though the nest was full, she still yearned for another child. Presently, they're on the roller coaster ride of waiting to adopt a baby with Down syndrome. They are registered with the National Down Syndrome Adoption Network and can hardly wait until they hold a beautiful child in their arms. All through this, Sylvia has been writing a book about the adoption journey and hopes to complete it soon. The title is going to be It Was Meant to Be. And in it, she shares the very special story of how they came to adopt the children and the challenges they faced before and after adopting, including their young son's endless surgeries with the hydrocephalus and spina bifida. Sylvia says that her life has been filled with enough storms to make the sunshine brighter and the rainbows achingly beautiful, and she is in awe and thankful for the beautiful colored life that God has given her. So we're going to have a very quick commercial break, and when we return, it'll be my very great pleasure to introduce you to Sylvia Baize. We'll be right back.
Tracey Maxfield is a retired nurse with over 36 years' experience in mental health and dementia. She has spent years studying, researching, and writing on dementia care, mental illness, and bullying in teenagers. Tracey struggled with chronic depression starting in her 20s, and after years of intense workplace stress, bullying, and harassment, her chronic depression intensified. Tracey wrote her book, Escaping the Rabbit Hole: My Journey Through Depression, as a way not to only relieve her stress and anxiety, but to help her friends and family better understand depression. The book became an international guide for mental health awareness, allowing Tracey to focus her attention on helping children, teenagers, and their parents work through mental health issues and bullying. She travels all over the world to meet with schools, mental health advocates, and experts in the mental health fields. She also offers online courses to help children, teenagers, and their parents work through issues, bringing families closer and to bring awareness to bullying in society. For more information on Tracey, her mission, the show, Tracey's book, and offered courses, visit traceymaxfield.com. You can see the latest news on mental health, upcoming guests on the podcast, read Tracey's blogs and articles, and more. Plus, follow Tracey all over social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube to watch the podcasts. See her daily messages and motivation and learn about each podcast guest and experts. Plus, while you're on the website at traceymaxfield.com, be sure to sign up for the free monthly newsletter. Follow Tracey with her upcoming events, interviews, seasonal tips, and the latest articles discussing important mental health topics and issues. And when you subscribe, you'll get a free copy of Tracey's booklet, Why Our Kids Are Suffering and How We Can Help Them. Just go to traceymaxfield.com. Tracey is committed to bringing parents and their children closer, to battle bullying and bring awareness to the mental health of children. That's why Tracey is offering her online courses to any adults, parents, children, and teenagers struggling during those hard times. Sign up for the course at traceymaxfield.com. You'll receive 8 full modules, over 12 videos, resources, and support discussing mental health, mood disorders, eating disorders, behavioral disorders, social media, drugs, suicide, risks and signs, and much, much more. Plus, you'll get access to Tracey's private Facebook group for individuals going through the same thing you are. Connect with others and share ideas, support, and motivation with Tracey helping along the way. Tracey's online courses is now for a limited time available for only $158. See all information online at traceymaxfield.com, where a brighter future is possible.
Welcome back, everyone. And as promised, it is my very great pleasure to introduce you all the way from Arizona, Sylvia Baize. Sylvia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
So at the very beginning, I said in the bio that when we first connected, you weren't sure that you had a story to share because you really weren't an expert. And I beg to differ. And I think just the experience that you've gone through with the adoption process, and certainly adoption of special needs children, makes it that little bit more challenging. I think that you have a lot to share that our viewers are going to find very helpful and very inspiring. So let's go back to the beginning. You were in Brazil and you started looking after foster children in your home. How did that feel?
Well, I was about 15 and we had about 3 sets of children that I took care of. And I was really, really innocent. I knew very little about PTSD. I knew so little, but I just took those children in and I loved them, and I was a disciplinarian, and so I made them toe the mark. Very young mother that I was, but I enjoyed so much seeing them blossom, and just there was some abuse in some of their paths, and I knew it was temporary, but yeah, it was it was definitely an experience that I would never trade. I enjoyed it a lot. I always wanted to be a mom or have an orphanage someday, which I
Right.
never have had yet, but maybe someday.
You never know, right? Absolutely. And so you were a foster mom at 15 years old to these children. Did you find that you were able to relate to them better because you were still, in effect, a teenager and they responded to you differently than maybe an adult who's in their 30s or 40s? Did you think that was helpful?
Yeah, I think so because I played a lot with them as a child too.
Right,
We
right.
played together and we roughhoused and we played hide and seek and we did all those things that children love to do that help you bond. And so, yeah, I think that was an advantage, that part.
Excellent. Now, obviously, before we came on the air, we were having a brief conversation beforehand, and you'd mentioned to me that around age 14 years old, you started having panic attacks, and you felt that you could not share that. Tell me, what was that like?
That was a very, very difficult time for me as a teenager. I didn't understand that I was going through so many changes in my body and in my emotions, my hormones. I just hit a real low. I believe that I did not have enough supplements. I was not taking supplements to help aid with all the energy I was putting out. I didn't have enough to go around. And so it affected my thinking. And yeah, I thought I was so alone. I thought that no one else had that problem. And I was ashamed of it. I wanted to be the tough girl that could handle anything, and I did. I handled it all by myself. I literally told no one. No one knew what I was going through. And death was a huge issue. I never thought of suicide, but I constantly thought I was going to die. I would, in 2 weeks or whatever amount of time, I would be dying. And that definitely is, now I know that it's depression, but I did not know it then. I had no idea what was going on.
Okay. And so you're going through all these strange emotions and not understanding what's happening. And then in the midst of all this, you start looking after children. Did that help you by redirecting your thoughts, or were you still experiencing the panic attacks and, that depressed mood?
I would say by sheer willpower, I got those under control. No one knew I like it wasn't a physical panic attack. It was mostly a mental.
Right,
Um, just in my mind, I would just about lose it. I wanted to just scream. But I
right.
would say by the time we got foster children, I had that. I had come out of that pretty much, and only it would revisit me once in a while, and I would work my way through it. But I think that they helped redirect me and help me think of something other than myself and,
Yes,
give me purpose.
absolutely.
And so, yeah, I think that somehow children are very healing. They just have a way of just bringing healing to a person.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, children have so many gifts to offer us. And I think as adults, sometimes we don't stand still long enough to appreciate what they can share with us and tell us and to actually live in their world, which is quite wonderful. So,
Yes, that's true.
so you foster until you're about 18, and then you end up moving to Kentucky where you teach. You then get married and have your children. So, how old was the eldest child when you decided that you were going to adopt?
Well, before any of my children were born, I wanted to adopt, but
Right,
it took a little convincing on my husband's part.
right,
But I would say my youngest was about 2 when I thought, it's probably time to start working that way because I knew
okay,
paperwork would take time. And then when we moved to California, that's when we decided to work through their system there and get our home study done. And so it was actually 3 years before we adopted. And so I think my youngest was about 5 when we adopted.
Okay. You also said in the bio, which I read out, it was during that time that you were going through a number of struggles and had what you feel was a little breakdown, a mental breakdown. How did that impact you as a mom, looking after your children, but also as you're going through this adoption process? Were you able to confide in your husband? Did you still feel alone?
Yeah, I could speak to, I could confide in my husband, and that helped a lot. But I had a good circle of friends. But sometimes when I would confide in them, they would be like, "Just get over it.
Yes.
It's
The
really,
stigma. Hmm.
that's how my mom acts, and you're just acting like my mom just quit now, And it was like, no, this is serious. I really, really am so low, and I couldn't do the social thing hardly. I would walk into a social gathering and all the noise. I couldn't make eye contact with people hardly because I didn't want them to see the pain and the anguish behind there that I just didn't dare talk about. And I also had my foster nephew living with us who was 18 and had a traumatic past. And that drained me a lot too. And he had all his PTSD to work through. And so we loved him dearly, and it worked for about 2 years, and then he moved on. But by the time he moved on soon after he moved on was when we got our son, when we adopted our son.
And you adopted a little boy, 7 months old,
Yes.
and he had spina bifida and hydrocephalus.
Yes.
You must have been overwhelmed. Yes?
Well,
Joyful, but a little overwhelmed as well.
yes, because I never really I enjoyed helping children that had a traumatic past. I enjoyed helping them through those emotions and just kind of more of a therapy mindset, but
Right.
medical was not my thing. I did not want anything to do with anything medical, hospital stays. My other children never ended up in the hospital. And so I just said, I don't see how I can do this. But when that little boy was placed in my arms, I said, you know what? I'll do anything for this child. And honestly, the only thing that helped me believe that I could do it was remembering the story of Jesus and the mothers bringing their babies to him back in the Bible times, and how he helped them take care of them. He
Right.
help, we can do it. And it's worked. It has really, really been just amazing how God has helped us through it.
So obviously, your children were very accepting of having a new baby brother into their lives. Albeit, obviously, I would imagine that your little boy is in a wheelchair, yes?
Yes, he is. Well, my oldest son, when we came home and told him, he was about 7 years old. And when we came home and told the children that we actually had not found, because we had been planning on adopting a baby girl, and when after 3 years of planning that way, we found a baby boy, that was something we had to break to the children. And he's very special. He won't be able to walk probably. And my oldest son just says, Mom, we can't do it. And I just could not believe strong empathy for others, a kind-hearted child. And he would pain the minute they walked in the room. And I thought, what is this? And so then I remembered all that, and it just hit me. He is afraid of this child's pain. He doesn't want to see suffer. And so we explained to him, no, you're going to be here to help him. And then he said, oh, it's not so serious. He won't be in pain. He just won't be able to walk. And it was amazing. He changed, and they were best friends. They have
That's
literally
awesome.
been best friends.
And I think this is such a good point to discuss because I think that we know every single child is unique and special and has gifts in their own way, and we really should not label them as having a disability, having a special need, having spina bifida, having autism. And I think sadly in society we've kind of become that type of nation where when we see someone that's different, even a child, we don't look at the innocence of the child, we label them, and that changes how kids then respond to them. Did you find that your little boy went through any bullying, or that there were other kids or even adults that were not so pleasant to him?
There was some unpleasantness, yes.
Yes.
I wouldn't say it was real open. It was more subtle.
Okay.
They were polite about it, but our son's head was extra big because he
Of the
couldn't
hydrocephalus.
fit his
Yes.
body because of hydrocephalus.
Mhm.
And so I got a lot of questions. And one remark that a friend made one time that probably cut the most was, I took him to church after a surgery, and he had kind of a bulge on his head after a shunt surgery. And she just looked at him and she just says, "You are one brave woman." And I suppose that was meant nicely, but to me it said, "I couldn't handle that, child. You're brave." And so yeah, people don't think before they speak. But for the most part, because of the situation we're in, we're also in a difficult situation with the group that we worshiped with, and we had a lot of trauma because before we ever got him, we did not have support to adopt. And so we knew from the start not to expect wide open arms
Okay.
for him. And yet nobody openly hurt us, purposely hurt us, I don't think.
Right.
They just did what they felt they needed to do to be accepted in their group.
Of course. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of people do to belong. Yes.
Right. Hmm.
Not understanding that it can also impact other people very hurtfully. So, how old was your little boy when you decided then to up and move from California and head to Arizona?
Well, he was let's see, we got him about 7 months old, and then he was um, about a year and 3 months when the adoption papers were through. And about that time, he had a shunt malfunction. And so we actually scheduled surgery for after the adoption day so we could keep that. It was not an emergency yet, and so we were able to do that. So, and then I wanted to go to the hospital with his new name so we didn't have to change that all over later. And that began many surgeries. He had 20 some surgeries in the next 2 years,
Oh, good
just
heavens.
one right after the other. And that was really hard for my three oldest because they were away from mom a lot. And so it was a struggle to keep everything going. My husband had to take care of the children at night. He would go to work, pick them up at his mom's, and come home and take care of them, get them ready in the morning for school. And so it was a big load for him too. He played a huge part in making it work.
Were any of the children jealous or angry or frustrated at you because of the time you were spending with their little brother, or was it that they were just sad that you weren't around?
No, I don't think they ever demonstrated anger towards me for that. They were very accepting. They understood that it was a necessary thing to do. And so they did very, very well with it. They were just obviously, they were going through a very difficult time at the school they went to also. There was a lot of abuse there. And so they needed mom extra right then. So I felt pretty torn. I knew who needed me on both sides. They
Of course.
all needed me, and I could only give so much. And they could come to the hospital for a while, but then they had to go back home. So it was definitely a very difficult time, and yet I would say that the joy that their little brother brought them was so healing. It just changed so much and helped them so much through what they had to go through.
Right. And so you mentioned they were having a difficult time in school. And so were they being bullied by their classmates at the school?
They would have been bullied more by their teachers.
Oh my goodness.
Um,
Okay.
there was some serious stuff going on that that affected them emotionally, and sometimes they would come home crying a lot, a
Oh my
lot.
goodness.
And when your child comes home and says, my teacher was mean to me, she made me stay in today and write sentences, anything they can say. They can say anything the teacher did, and you say, well, the teacher probably had a reason, and you stand up for the teacher. But there's a difference between your child coming home and complaining once in a while and coming home crying every day. There's an emotional something going on, and
Definitely.
meltdowns, and just complete that's not right for that age to be having a meltdown. A second grader shouldn't be doing that unless
No.
something is really bothering them. And so, yeah, we had to work through a lot of that. And actually, my oldest son, who is so empathetic, all my children are empathetic, but he has a special gift. He actually would come home crying, not because he was hurt, but because his friend had been hurt by the teacher.
Oh my goodness.
It was he could not handle seeing someone else in pain. And so that was the hardest thing for him, was to cope seeing his friends hurt.
Right. And so, with regards to the school, was it something you as parents went and addressed, or was the school not responsive to any conversation?
It was pretty complicated. We tried to address it, and therefore we were the ones that were ostracized then. We
Yes.
needed to be quiet about it.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
And so we were the bad guys. We just were the bad guys.
Right.
And so we just had to live through it. And our prayer was constantly, get us out of this place, get us out of this place. And so yeah. Oh, then you had asked earlier about moving to Arizona. Well, when our son that we adopted, Alex, he had all those surgeries, and then we just were not getting anywhere. The shunt they were using worked for 95% of the kids, just perfect. But for him, it just was not working. 4 months out of the hospital was the best we ever did.
Oh gosh.
And I mean, we were in every 2 weeks, sometimes once a month, whatever. Sometimes it was 3 surgeries in one stay. And so I did a lot of research online, because I just said, his quality of life needs to be better than this. There's
Definitely.
surely a way. So I found this gentleman online that had such trouble with shunts, and he tried 18 different shunts. No, he tried every shunt over 18 years. Every shunt there was, and he finally found a shunt that worked, and he posted what shunt it was that worked for him. And I thought, you know what, that's what I need for Alex. And so I went to the neurosurgeon, and I said, will you please try it? It's just another surgery. Can you try this different brand? And he said, okay, we'll do it. And so that's what we did. We put it in, and he has been surgery free for 10 years.
That's excellent. And
It worked. And so then right after that, we moved to Arizona, because I would have been really scared to move and change doctors when he was so complex. He was
right.
always, his doctor knew what to do for him. And so once we had that all resolved, then I was like, okay, now I'm comfortable, we can move. So then that's when we moved to Arizona.
So I'm going to ask you to give a little bit of medical here, because as a nurse, I know exactly what you're talking about, but I'm sure there's some listeners and viewers that are going, why would he need a shunt? So spina bifida, many children can have, actually I have spina bifida, I have spina bifida occulta, but many children can have spina bifida and hydrocephalus, and it's related to the spinal fluid, the CS, the cerebrospinal fluid. And so explain why a shunt is inserted, please.
Okay, so we all have fluid in our head, and it drains down through our spine. But because he has a shunt, and so he cannot drain his brain naturally in a man-made shunt, so that it can drain and his actually drained into his abdomen.
Yes.
But he had so much fluid, he produced so much fluid, his body couldn't keep up, and so then we had to go in and put it into his atrium. So his drains into his heart.
Into his heart.
And it's worked great.
Perfect. That's awesome. And so, yes, I mean, sometimes it's always best for mum to tell us what the process is so everyone understands, because sometimes I can let my medical brain get away with me and we haven't simplified it. So,
Yeah, and then a shunt malfunction can actually be like he would get blood clots,
yes.
and it would block it, or some kind of a piece of matter would get in there and block it or whatever. And so we very seldom had a serious emergency where we had to rush, but we made many trips down to the hospital for him to have a shunt revision. And the biggest trauma for him with that was not necessarily the surgery itself. It was leaving me at the door when they had to take him away from me. So he still has separation issues because of that.
I was going to say, it sounds like he does have an attachment disorder, which to me, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
I mean, all those surgeries, surgeries are stressful for an adult. For a young child, it is very scary. And you were his angel, his safety net. And so, of course, mom has to be there. Now, with the time frame where the shunt has actually worked beautifully and you've not had any more issues, has his attachment disorder improved in that he's not so dependent on you or clingy, and I don't mean that in a nasty way, wanting you to be ever present?
He was never really clingy, but he was always he would verbalize his fear always.
Okay.
Are you going to come back for me? Are you going to come back for me? And
Okay.
so always we would promise, we will be at the door, we will be there for you. And so we always had to do that affirmation, that reaffirming, yes, we will be there. We were always there for you. We will never leave the hospital. So we had to do that. And he would always ask me, hold my hand, Mom. So sometimes I'd be driving to the hospital. I have to reach behind me in his car seat behind me and hold his hand all the way to the hospital. My arm would be just about broke, but it was what comforted him. And so, it was an amazing experience. And he's grown up so much. He's just 13 now and just doing so well with all that. He goes to a friend's house every now and then and spends the night.
Oh, wonderful.
But he will get anxiety if he knows his dad's going to go to a job about 4 hours away and doesn't come home for a few nights. He'll get anxiety during that time. And when his oldest brother, who he was best friends with, moved away, he lives 4.5 hours from us. He has anxiety sometimes because he doesn't see him often enough. Right. That separation bothers him a lot.
Okay. And again, that's very understandable, certainly. So after Alex, you then went and adopted 2 beautiful little girls.
Yes, we did. And so here in Arizona, we decided we had 2 restaurants, and one at a time, but we went through 2 restaurants in 4 years and worked ourselves sick. And then we decided, we just need to spend more time with the family, and this isn't family life, living in a restaurant. And so then after that, we went into, got our foster license and decided to go through the foster system here. And almost immediately, the social worker said, I have a little girl. She's not up for adoption, because we were going to only do adoption, not foster. Not just foster, we're going to do foster to adopt. Right. And she said, she seems to be perfect for your family. And I thought, you know what? I've learned that social workers have that intuition. I'm going to trust her. And I said, okay, we'll do it. And yeah, she fit our family like a glove. She was a little wildcat. Her name is Lily. We called her Tiger Lily because she literally would scratch my face. She would pull my glasses off and throw them. She would just attack me in pure anger because she just didn't understand what was going on.
Right. Yes.
And so, we worked through all that, and And I remember the day I would just hold her hands and just tell her she couldn't do that. And I remember the day that she looked me in the eye, and she went to grab my glasses, and she looked me in the eye, and she just had that look in there. Oh, you love me. I'm not going to do this. And she never did it again.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it was like, wow, this is a long road, but we actually made it. We got to where I wanted to get with her. And then let's see, 9 months after we got her, she was 2 when we got her, and then 9 months later we got her little half sister,
Okay.
who has a cleft lip and cleft palate, and she'd had several surgeries. She'd been very neglected, but she'd been in very good care with her grandma for a year before we got her. And so when we got her, then she had to have one more surgery, and now she's up for another surgery. But she was not a tiger. She was the silent sufferer.
Oh,
And
dear.
those are actually harder for me to deal with, because I'd rather see it out in the open, because you know what
Yes,
to do then. You know what's
exactly.
going on. And she's pretty much nonverbal. We're working on that. She's doing a lot better. But when you can't express yourself with words, you're going to use, pouting or whatever, and that was her tool. And so, yeah, we've come a long, long ways. I'm just thinking the other day what a happy, happy little girl she is now. So none of that comes without work, but it.
Absolutely. And I think this is what's so important, is that many people, when they want to adopt, and that is awesome. I don't think that not all of them, but some of them do not understand that just because you bring a beautiful little boy or girl into your household, they're not suddenly going to love you and run into your arms and everything is going to be wonderful, because the environment that child was in, whatever they experienced with the maternal parent or parents, all of that is part of their story. And it's I think it's becoming, we talk about it more openly now. I think many, many years ago, we always used to say, oh, you're giving the child a gift and they're going to be perfect. And then when the child isn't, the parents feel, what am I doing wrong? What's wrong with me? And blame themselves. But it's so much more than that. As you've said, it's you really have to deal with their feelings of being unloved and abandonment, and coming into a new environment which is so alien to them. So what did you find were the best tools when you and Patrick, when your tiger Lily was acting out, or your other little girl was just withdrawn into a shell? What was the consistent modeling, the behaviors that you did, which you think helped bring them to that point of, oh wow, I'm part of this family and they love me?
Well, I can't say I think that I did it all right. I definitely don't feel like I had all the perfect tools.
Right.
But so there was just so much pent up frustration, so much to work through. And actually, my husband Pat was actually probably the lifesaver, because they adore him. They've always adored him, and I was the bad guy always.
Of course.
I was the one that took everything out on, and so it was good for them to just go to him, and he could just love on them, and they accepted it from him a little more than from me at times.
Right.
And so, yeah, and just consistency. I say you just got to keep loving them. You just got to keep loving them, and just know that there is always going to be, you sow the seed, it's going to grow into a plant. You put in the right seeds, the good plant will grow, and you just got to keep working at it and watering that and letting it grow. It may not happen today, though. When you put the seed in, you won't see the result. It takes so much patience to know that this is going to take time.
Now, were there any online resources or local support groups or even the social worker, anyone that was giving you guidance or advice on, how to kind of keep showing up and, working with the children's, to kind of get them to, I would say, relax and understand and open their hearts that, that you are worthy of love and this is your home.
Yes, we had wonderful social workers, and I can't thank them enough for all they did. They were always there for me. And also Yavapai Guidance Center was excellent. Actually, no, it was not Yavapai. We were actually in another county. But they were there for me also. We had regular meetings, and we talked through it, and they gave me encouragement and directed me. And I will say, though, that my girls definitely did not have a severe case of RAD. They obviously had a touch of it, but I have never dealt with what some moms I know have dealt with.
Right.
I just take my hat off to those moms that work so hard and they just see no results or very little results for so long. I mean, my results came so quickly, and I say it takes patience, but for me it was quicker just because I think my girls were younger and maybe the trauma wasn't so bad. And so I admire those moms that work so hard at it and are so dedicated,
Yes.
and it's such a constant thing, even when the children go into their teens. And I admire that a lot. I don't know if I would have had the mental fortitude if I would have been given a very, very difficult.
Absolutely. And I think also that you had such a solid family unit. I think, you had older children and you had a supportive husband, and I think that's also imperative when you want to maintain that family strength and consistency.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And so, of course, you have 3 adopted children, and now you want another one.
We do.
And you actually want to adopt a child with Down syndrome, and I think that is that's awesome. I have a niece who has Down syndrome. I'm very, very familiar
Oh, how sweet.
with Down syndrome, and I know that there's so many people still that there is so much stigma attached still, and I
Yeah.
think that what with medical advances and all the different supports, Down syndrome children can have wonderful quality of lives, wonderful lives. My niece is now, oh my goodness, I think she must be in her mid 40s. And when she was born, I was 11. And I remember my cousin, when she gave birth, and everyone in the family was devastated. It was that hush, hush, let's not talk about it. And the doctor advised her to just put her away in an institution, that there was no point.
Oh my.
And my cousin, she was 21, she'd only been married a year, and she said, absolutely not. This is my daughter, and she's going to have one hell of a shot at life. And she worked her heart and soul with Tammy, and Tammy could not communicate verbally aside from grunting, but she learned sign language, and
Oh, okay.
and she communicates beautifully in sign language. After the age of 18, she went into a local work area, that part of their quota was they could employ a certain number who had special needs, and she started making jewelry and doing artwork, and ended up then moving into a group home, and had done amazingly well. I mean, it's incredible at how much she flourished having unconditional love. I think it was, there was never a
Hmm.
case of she can't do that. She's going to try, and if that won't work, we're going to try something else. But
Uh-huh.
she would not allow her to be classified as different and singled out. And I think that is what's so important for people to realize is that it, they are not children with Down syndrome. Um, they're not vegetables. I hate it when they think that they are
Yeah.
not able to think and not able to do things. They absolutely can, and they have feelings and emotions just like us. And you can have amazing conversations and so much fun. And as a child, when you're playing with a child who has Down syndrome, it you develop so much compassion, I think it is, and insight into how
Hmm.
you can help make the life of another child better, and it helps the child themselves.
Yes, and you empower them to
Yes,
become, if you put a cap on it, they're not going to do any more than what you put the cap on. Oh,
exactly.
sometimes they surprise you, but they don't have they're using their own power then, but you can give your power to them. You can empower them by saying, you know, there's more to this than what the books say and what
I
the
agree.
doctor says or someone else says, and their lifespan has changed so much for
Oh my
people with Down
goodness,
syndrome. What, 20 years old was their lifespan, and now it's
considerably.
70, some are 80. It's just amazing.
And when I was nursing in the hospital, I had many Down syndrome patients that were coming in that were in their 60s and 70s. And at that point, they were dealing with some of the issues that they were born with regarding the heart. But they lived wonderful lives. And many got married. And,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and it's I struggle to find the right words because it's easy. I understand, haven't been there. I know um, what how amazing like gifts, and I that's why I applaud you. I'm sure there are people that are watching this that are going, "Are you kidding me? Sylvia is going to adopt a child with Down syndrome." And I think what I'm trying to say is you may not feel comfortable that that's something that you want to do, but don't overlook the fact that this is a child. And
Right, exactly.
this is a child that has, like all children, has wonderful gifts and can add so much to the quality
Hmm.
of everyone's life. And we need to stop looking at, oh, he's got spina bifida, she's got Down syndrome, right? He's got epilepsy. I always say with mental illness, you should never let that define you, right? You do not
Right.
let the illness, the disability, the special needs
Hmm.
you have define who you are as a person. It is a part of you, which makes you this unique person, but it is not who you are. And I think this is what we have to keep changing in society, in their attitude of life is not perfection, right?
Right. And there's so many people advocating for Down syndrome. I appreciate it so much. Our local chapter is just excellent. I'm on several groups on Facebook, and they're just empowering each other. It's about helping each other through it, and their struggles with it. I
Yes,
totally I know, there's things that are just not pleasant about some of their habits that they can't help. They form, and some of them are even scary, like the running away. Some children have that,
yes.
and it just takes a lot from the parents. But I honestly don't think I could do it without my children. They are hands-on, always helping with everybody. Our family works together, um, like clockwork. I couldn't do it all by myself.
And I think that that's a valuable thing because children empowering children is the greatest gift of all.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And just, for a child to feel loved and validated and supported, they can accomplish so much. And I
Yes.
think we need so much more, because we know there are so many children out there, teenagers, that do not have that love, that respect, that support. And I
Mm-hmm.
firmly believe when I do these podcasts that what I'm trying to do is kind of share experiences and stories and give education to anyone that's listening, because even if the child or the teenager is not yours and is not part of your family, why can't you be that adult, that trusted adult who can be their mentor or be their
Mm-hmm.
best supporter or can be their confidant when things are going bad and they can't turn to anyone? Why can't you, even if you're the neighbor, why can't you be that person and open your heart and help move, the child, the teenager, into a better place, into light, I call it, from darkness, because you're giving them a gift, and they're actually giving you a
Definitely.
gift back. But I strongly believe that in order to raise children, the saying is it takes a village. Right now it takes a society is, because of everything
Mm-hmm.
that's going on and the horrors and all that we see on the news. And every adult, whether or not you're the teacher, counselor, parent, neighbor, shopkeeper, high school coach, whoever you are, be there for the kids. I call it, be that beacon of light.
Yes. And how many stories haven't we heard of someone that was that and changed that someone's life?
And it
That
is.
they weren't making progress because someone said they couldn't. And then someone came along and says, yes, you can, and empowered them, and it changed their life. Yeah, I have a cousin who has Down syndrome. He's, I think, 30 now. And so we grew up hearing stories about him, and he is just dearly beloved in the family. Just everyone loves him to death. And he actually wanted to be a firefighter so badly that the fire department in their town formed a special position for him to
That's
where he could work
awesome.
at the fire station a couple days a week. So yeah, that's the community you're talking about, that just gives so much to make their life meaningful. And he has changed so many people's lives
Yes.
because of who he touched, because he has such a beautiful spirit.
And they do. They have beautiful hearts. And I mean, I can't speak for all children, teenagers with Down syndrome, but everyone I've met, they've got wicked sense of humor. And
Truly.
you can sit and laugh with them, and their laughter will then make you laugh. They can give you so much joy. And it's yes, and I love that you shared that story, because every single person in the world is worthy of love, and children, teenagers especially, we need to open our arms and give them a chance at life. We have to.
Hmm. Exactly.
We have to. They're
Yes.
their future. So it's almost time for us to end the podcast, Sylvia, but words of advice. So if there's a mum or a dad that's sitting here and they may have adopted a child and they're really struggling, what words of advice would you offer them?
I think that being consistent, even though you're feeling low, and sometimes I remember feeling so low, like I have nothing to give anymore. I've used it all up. There's just nothing more to give. But you do. Being present is giving.
Yes, being
And
present.
and sometimes just not saying something instead of saying something wrong, and or if you do say something wrong, make it right. But children are so forgiving. They
Yes.
there's so much. If they just know you're present, you're there consistently for them. um, that you don't throw the tantrum because overreacting to what they do. Just
Absolutely.
sometimes I have had to learn it the hard way. Just let them do it. Let them work it out, and then we'll deal with the situation later if something was done, if they got out of hand. But to be present and just, I'm here for you no matter what you do or how you act, I'm here for you. And I think that is probably the biggest thing you can do for children.
I actually 100% agree. I've done a number of podcasts on other shows, and they always ask me for parting words. And I always say, if you're a parent or a guardian, or if you're a family member and there's a child or a teenager in the home, just turn off your TV or your phone and just take a minute out of your life and just go and see them, and either sit on the bed or sit next to them, even if they're on the floor, and be on their level. And the power of touch, and the parameters of touch, the touch, whether it's a hug or just a squeeze on the shoulder, and tell your child, your teenager, how proud you are of them and how much you love them, and that you will do anything for them. And I said, even if they'll just say, what's wrong with you? Get away. You're being weird. Don't creep me out. Bite your tongue and walk away, because you've lit a little flame in there, and that makes all the difference, because sometimes you have no idea what path your child was deciding to go on up until that moment. And so I love what you're saying. You've got to be there. Absolutely. Be present and be available and show love. I think those are the most important qualities.
One of the things that helps so much for us, like especially for my little girls, when they would get so burdened down with whatever went through their little heads that I didn't even know what it was. And often Lily would actually, she can be very aggressive and hurt other children. She can hurt other people when she's so upset. And, you get busy and you don't think about it. And then all of a sudden I'd be like, oh, we haven't had enough mom time. So I would say, okay, it's time for mom time. And we'd go sit on the couch and look at a book together. She may not even want to look at a book, but we'd look at a book together. We would sit there and I would just talk about the book. And she'd be really stiff. She didn't really want to be by me, but after a while, she'd start melting into my body like, Mom's here. And I think that mom time really probably was the key thing to getting her to bond with me, because it took a while for her to bond with me.
Yes, and it's whether you're mom or dad, it's that one-on-one time, because it shows them that they're special and that they mean something to you. And I think that helps build such wonderful relationships as they continue to get older, because you've got that trust and that respect, and that is key as they navigate the adolescence years, which can be challenging as it is. Right. But I think, yes, I advise parents, like, have a date night with your child or your teenager, really be with them and get to know them. And yes, I think that's it. Beautiful, beautiful advice, Sylvia. And I want to thank you so much for your time. I know you're so busy. You just finished homeschooling, and you've probably got some hungry mouths there that will need supper soon. And so I do thank you so very much for taking the time to speak to us today. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I wish everybody endurance and courage in whatever they're facing. And there's a way through it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Sylvia Baize is a wife, mother, and homeschool teacher. She was born in Brazil and by the age of 15 to 18 fostered 3 sets of children in her parents' home, along with teaching homeschooling for 3 years in church schools. Years later, living in California, she went through a mental breakdown triggered by some family stress and some disagreements with religious leaders of the church. Between relocating the family, starting businesses, and working through the family events, she continued to adopt children and work with the foster care system. She's now the mother of 6 wonderful children. Sylvia is currently writing a book about the adoption journey called It Was Meant to Be, sharing the stories of adoption, the challenges that it holds, and the importance of working with children in need. Sylvia is currently working on trying to adopt a baby with Down syndrome and registered with the National Down Syndrome Adoption Network.
Welcome back, everyone. I do hope you enjoyed this week's episode with my special guest, Sylvia Baize. What an amazing woman with a beautiful heart. I call them Earth Angels, and she is certainly one of them. So, this wraps up another episode of Engage, Educate, Empower. Please join me again next Thursday at 2 o'clock Pacific, 5 o'clock Eastern for another episode. Stay safe. Stay well and take care, everyone. Until next time. Bye-bye.